Located in Mission Valley, just outside of San Diego, California, sat one of the oldest NFL stadiums to ever live, and older than the modern NFL itself. Having hosted 3 Super Bowls, Qualcomm Stadium became known globally as one of the best places for the world's biggest events. However, with the Chargers' departure in 2017, questions lingered as to the venue's future and viability for the modern sports world. Join me today as we recap one of the most eventful stadiums of its era, discover its pre-NFL days, and find out what ultimately happened to San Diego's sparkling diamond of Mission Valley. My name is Lee Brees, and this is Modern Ruins, Episode 7. It's hard to imagine, in today's modern world of sports leagues, that there are still stadiums in use that were built for their long-deceased predecessors and rivals. By the 1950s, the National Football League had survived several competitors in the still considerably new market of competitive sports entertainment leagues, but its biggest challenger was still yet to come. It was also at this time that the NFL had grown large enough to share the limelight with Major League Baseball as the most popular sports leagues in the U.S. Even with the growing success the NFL was having, some franchises were buried deep in its shadow. One team that was going the opposite direction of the NFL was the Chicago Cardinals, who found themselves in a distant second to the popularity of the Chicago Bears. Cardinals owner Charles Bidwell desperately wanted to move the team to a different market, but his desperation was offset by exasperation at the amount of money the NFL wanted in order to approve relocation. Bidwell then began to seek out investors to finance his team's move. In his search, Bidwell would meet millionaire Lamar Hunt, who wanted to buy the team entirely and move them to Dallas, but Bidwell refused to sell any portion of ownership. Several other investors would make similar offers, but all were met with rejection. The investors were set on getting NFL franchises of their own, and after not being able to acquire a team, the 4 men met directly with NFL Commissioner Bert Bell and proposed the league be expanded from its 12-team current state to further its growth, which was also rejected. The investors, now having been denied twice in acquiring their own team, flew home feeling defeated. Lamar Hunt, however, decided to see opportunity instead of misfortune. Hunt suggested that the men start a new sports entertainment football league under their own control to dip into untapped markets across the country, to which the other men agreed to. 6 teams were initially given charters at the first league meeting in 1959 and participated in the first draft process, but 2 more teams would be added before any games of the newly named American Football League were played. Much anticipation and excitement had grown for the AFL's first season as the league was able to secure several notable college players who had been destined for the NFL, including Heisman Trophy winner Billy Cannon. 8 teams total played on opening day, including the Los Angeles Chargers. Baron Hilton, a 32-year-old hotel executive and son of Conrad Hilton, who had founded the popular hotel chain Hilton Hotels, was one of the 6 original men able to secure an AFL franchise. The name Chargers was chosen as Charge was already a popular chant at Dodgers baseball and USC football games. The Chargers found great success in the AFL's opening year, winning the division title and competing in the AFL's championship game on January 1, 1961, but lost to the Cannon-led Houston Oilers 24-16. Similar to the Chicago Cardinals, the Chargers played in the shadow of the NFL's Los Angeles Rams, who could easily fill the Coliseum's near 100,000 seats, when the Chargers were lucky to fill 10,000. The Rams organization was also not very accommodating of the team and its rival league. Hilton knew that if his team was going to have any staying power, it would be in a new city. In particular, he saw San Diego as one of the best markets for his team to be in. Given the lack of another franchise in the area, the business opportunity of exclusive television contracts showed great promise. In addition, most AFL owners weren't necessarily after the immediate financial success of their ball club, but were more interested in their team becoming an NFL franchise, which once again was very probable given San Diego's untapped market. Around the same time, Jack Murphy, a sports columnist at the San Diego Union newspaper, began writing columns to propose a professional sports team move to San Diego, and in the midst of the AFL's inaugural season, went on to suggest that Hilton should relocate the Chargers to the city. Murphy would continue to write more columns over the course of the next year, which gradually persuaded the already tempted Hilton to move his team to San Diego for the following AFL season. On January 5, 1961, Hilton would travel to San Diego to meet with Mayor Charles Dale as he gave the franchise owner a tour of the only place he had ready for the team to play, the 46-year-old Balboa Stadium and its 15,000 seats. The two negotiated on doubling the stadium's capacity, renovating the locker rooms, and a promise that San Diego and its residents would sell out 20,000 season tickets. The meeting concluded with the Chargers relocating to San Diego. Later that year, the Chargers would defeat the Oakland Raiders 44-0 on opening day and go on to have great success during their time at the Rough and Ready complex. But with Hilton's long-term goal of owning an NFL franchise, Balboa Stadium was only a temporary fix. After the Chargers briefly considered a relocation to Anaheim, and with the minor league baseball team San Diego Padres on the cusp of becoming a major league club, proposals began flooding in for a new, grandiose stadium to not only be the home to San Diego's sports teams, but also put the city on the map nationally for hosting sports and other events. The first concept from Boyle Engineering suggested construction of a $20 million floating stadium that would feature landlocked playing surfaces for baseball and football. The grandstands would be placed on a series of pontoons that could easily be reconfigured for either event, and could be removed entirely to use for water sports. The site would be located in Mission Bay, near the relatively undeveloped Mission Valley. Columnist Jack Murphy, who had built public support for the Chargers' move and for the Padres' first stadium, championed the revolutionary idea. Baron Hilton also thought the stadium would be, quote, the finest home for a football team I can imagine. Consultants to the city of San Diego also endorsed the idea. An architectural firm was hired, and the city then began accepting bids from contractors for the floating stadium in Mission Bay. However, a second consulting firm was hired by the city, and they reached the conclusion that the stadium on the bay would cost more than $41 million in 1965 dollars, which placed the stadium at about $500 per seat. The city council then asked for another concept be put together for a conventional, non-floating stadium. When the firm presented their idea for the new complex to the council, they had arrived at a 50,000-seat stadium be built on a Mission Valley site already owned by the city at a cost of $300 a seat. Jack Murphy, the city council, and the residents of San Diego were all set on the floating stadium idea and had a very difficult time letting the project go. But on April 28, 1965, the council would vote unanimously to construct the conventional, non-floating stadium, and a few months later, 72% of San Diego voters authorized funds to build the venue. The city of San Diego broke ground for the new stadium on December 18, 1965, and construction continued for 20 months. The final design by Frank L. Hope Architects was a 50,000-seat mixed-use stadium designed in the brutalist style. It was the first multi-purpose stadium to use the square and circle, octorad shape, which flattened out the sides of the stadium to make it less circular or ovular, to provide better visibility for spectators. This led the style to be nicknamed the Super Circle or Square Circle. Even with these improvements in the design, it kept fans far away from the action and failed to increase the desirability of multi-purpose stadiums, which were still fairly new at the time. The area chosen for the site was also located in a lesser developed portion of San Diego, not in the downtown area, which was another common feature of stadiums built during this era. The new sports entertainment complex, constructed by Robertson Larson Donovan, would open with a horseshoe-shaped grandstand and 3 tiers of seats, with the scoreboard portion of the stadium only having 1 tier. The grandstands would be multicolored, as was typical at the time. Fortunate for Chargers owner Baron Hilton and the city of San Diego, in the summer of 1966, while their new sparkling sports entertainment complex was still under construction, the NFL and AFL announced a long-anticipated merger to combine the competing leagues. The two would retain their identity and team structures, but each would become a conference in the new National Football League. and the announcement instantly made the new NFL the most popular sports league in the United States. Under the terms of the deal, the leagues would keep their own conference schedules for the next 4 years before combining for the 1970 season, but would begin to compete against each other immediately post-season, creating the Super Bowl. Regardless of the announcement, the new stadium would still open as a minor league venue. San Diego Stadium, as the new complex would be named, opened for the Chargers' first game of the AFL preseason on Sunday, August 20th, 1967, with a capacity of 50,000 fans for football and a final construction cost of $28 million. The Chargers lost to the Detroit Lions 38-17, but would only lose 2 home games in the venue's inaugural season. Minor League Baseball's San Diego Padres would become the stadium's second tenant the following spring, and in 1969, they were granted Major League status due to the MLB's addition of 4 teams to its ranks. San Diego Stadium began with the center field wall located a whopping 420 feet from home plate, which made hitting home runs very difficult, and eventually a fence was put up to decrease the distance needed for a home run down to 405 feet. In addition to the Chargers and Padres, San Diego State University, located 5 miles from the venue, called the landlocked stadium in Mission Valley for its home field from opening day until its ultimate demise, becoming its longest tenant. The 1970s would be dramatic yet mostly quiet for the complex, as the Padres and Chargers consistently finished with losing records. The Padres nearly moved to Washington, D.C. in 1973 before a lawsuit deterred the franchise's potential buyer, and Ray Kroc ended up buying the team in 1974. The stadium would gain its first perennial event in 1978, which featured the Western Athletic Conference champion versus a nationally ranked opponent in the Holiday Bowl. In anticipation of the bowl game, the managers of the venue installed an all-color scoreboard built by American Sign and Indicator, which was the first ever constructed. Later in the year, the stadium hosted the MLB All-Star Game with an attendance near full capacity of over 51,000 fans. Even though San Diego's first decade or more hadn't quite yet lived up to the hype, the Holiday Bowl and All-Star Game would only be a small preview of the events destined for the site. Before things took off, tragedy would strike the San Diego sports world in September 1980 when its biggest fan and advocate, columnist Jack Murphy, passed away from lung cancer at the age of 57. The city council would vote soon after to rename San Diego Stadium to Jack Murphy Stadium, and it would go on to be known by most as just the Murph. After the Chargers had back-to-back double-win seasons, which included the 1980 and later the 1981 AFC Championship games, the newly named venue was doing very well and consistently reached capacity limits. So in 1983, seating was increased to 59,000 spectators for football at a cost of $10 million. The move would benefit the Padres at first, however, as they brought the first championship games to the Murph for the 1984 World Series. The rest of the 1980s would once again prove to be lackluster for the Padres and Chargers, but despite the performance of its tenants, Jack Murphy Stadium would gain one of the highest accolades possible for a sports entertainment complex when NFL owners awarded San Diego Super Bowl 22. The city had beat out 14 other bids to host the big game. Super Bowl 22, played on January 31st, 1988, was broadcast by ABC with Al Michaels and Frank Gifford in the broadcast booth. More than 80 million viewers worldwide watched the Washington Redskins and Denver Broncos battle in Mission Valley, and a 30-second commercial break ad cost $645,000. Doug Williams, who became the first Black American to start at quarterback in the Super Bowl, was crowned the game's MVP, and the Redskins defeated the Broncos 42-10, with the Broncos having already lost the Super Bowl prior. Chubby Checker and the Rockettes played the halftime show. The program, produced by Radio City Music Hall, featured 88 grand pianos and 44 Rockettes, to which was also the first performance of Jennifer Jones, who was the first Black American to join the Rockettes. Despite the lopsided score, many considered the event to be a great success. The 1990s would continue Jack Murphy Stadium's rise as the Chargers and Padres would both bring championship games back to the venue. The liftoff point for the decade would be in 1993 as NFL owners, very satisfied with the events of Super Bowl 22, awarded the stadium its second opportunity to host a big game in Super Bowl 32, which was to be played in 1998. Anticipation of hosting the coveted global event for a second time brought several changes to the stadium. As part of the Chargers' new lease at the Murph, the stadium was completely enclosed, bringing seating capacity up to an astounding 70,000 fans. More than 50 suites were added, and financial control of all 113 suites were given to the Chargers. Unfortunate for the Padres, who could never attract a crowd large enough to fill up even half the venue, it was becoming clear the direction the managers of the venue were going. In 1997, Qualcomm Corporation paid $18 million to acquire naming rights for the now 30-year-old complex, which helped the city pay for the $78 million in renovations. The stadium's new name would be Qualcomm Stadium, removing Jack Murphy from its name entirely. Super Bowl 32, on January 25, 1998, would go on to be watched by 90 million viewers worldwide, and a 30-second ad cost $1.3 million. The game was broadcast by NBC, with Dick Enberg and Phil Simms in the broadcast booth. Now former Redskins player and Super Bowl 22 MVP Doug Williams came out for the coin toss between the returning Denver Broncos and the Green Bay Packers. Despite Green Bay being heavily favored, the game remained even throughout, and the Broncos would come out victorious, winning 31-24. A much more competitive game compared to San Diego's first Super Bowl. The halftime show was dedicated to Motown's 40th anniversary and featured Boyz II Men, Smokey Robinson, Queen Latifah, Martha Reeves, and The Temptations. The pregame show was a tribute to the history and culture of California, narrated by comedian Phil Hartman, who would be murdered only 4 months later. Once again, the game was considered a great success, and you couldn't argue against Qualcomm and the city of San Diego as being known globally as a top-tier location for the world's biggest sporting events. While Qualcomm Stadium was known mostly at this point for football, the venue would host all kinds of events throughout its life. Most notably, rugby, soccer, Sports Car Club of America races, AMA Supercross Championships, and MotoX World Championships. Billy Graham would host a crusade at the Q in 2003, and a second bowl game was brought to the stadium in 2005, named the Poinsettia Bowl. The venue was slightly ahead of the stadium concert boom, and having a large distance between the playing area and fans, it wasn't a fantastic concert venue. Regardless, the stadium played host to many notable concerts, including ZZ Top, The Who, The Rolling Stones, Guns N' Roses, NSYNC, One Direction, and Coldplay, with The Who recording a live album during their concert there. 1998 would prove to be one of the best years for the venue, as in addition to Super Bowl 32, the Padres would bring the World Series back to Qualcomm, but lost to the Yankees 4-0. With the Padres winning ways, however, came the desire for a new, modern, baseball-only stadium. By the late 1990s, cities across the country had begun replacing their dating, unsatisfactory multi-purpose stadiums. Fresh off their World Series appearance, the Padres got what they wanted when voters approved funding for a new 42,000-seat venue in downtown San Diego, with the city splitting the cost 60-40 with the team. Ground was broke on May 3, 2000, and construction would be off and on due to political and lawsuit-related delays, which kept the ball club at Qualcomm Stadium through the end of the 2003 season. The Padres would end their more than 3-decade run at the only stadium they ever knew on September 28, 2003, in a loss to the Colorado Rockies 8-10 before a record-breaking 60,000 fans, and began playing at the new Petco Park the following season. After suffering the loss of one of its original tenants, Qualcomm Stadium was now a full-time football stadium, with scoreboards and temporary seating for baseball no longer needed. Even with losing 60-plus guaranteed events annually, it was still business as usual at the complex. When the Padres departed in 2003, the stadium was now 36 years old, which by the standards of the time was ancient, but in spite of its age, the stadium had not fully toppled the peak of its reign. Yet. Super Bowl 37 was awarded to San Francisco as the city promised the league a brand new sparkling venue for the big game, but after the 49ers owner, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., fell into significant legal trouble, resulting in DeBartolo surrendering ownership of the franchise, plans for a new stadium fell apart. Rather than hope the city and developers would get their act together, NFL owners voted to move the game to San Diego and awarded Qualcomm with its third Super Bowl. The decision made Qualcomm the stadium with the fourth most Super Bowls hosted of all time, with Tampa's, New Orleans, and Miami's stadiums taking the top spots. Perhaps ironic, the NFL would wait 14 years for San Francisco to build their new stadium before playing another Super Bowl in the state of California. Super Bowl 37 would go on to be known as the Pirate Bowl and the Gruden Bowl, as it featured the league's two pirate-themed franchises in the Oakland Raiders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It also had Buccaneers coach John Gruden facing off against his former team after having been traded by Raiders owner Al Davis 1 year prior. The game was played on January 26, 2003, and was broadcast once again by ABC with Al Michaels and John Madden in the broadcast booth, with a 30-second commercial break ad costing $2.1 million. The halftime show was sponsored by AT&T Wireless and featured Shania Twain, Gwen Stefani led No Doubt, and Sting. The Buccaneers dominated the game, defeating the Raiders 48-21, and Bon Jovi would play a post-game concert after the trophy ceremony. It became clear during the game that the venue had become very dated and lacked many of the luxuries and amenities the NFL required for its biggest event. The NFL informed the city of San Diego that they wouldn't receive another Super Bowl until a new stadium was built, and discussions to replace the dating venue began. In 2005, the Chargers approached the city council with a proposal that demolished Qualcomm Stadium and built a new venue surrounded by an elaborate condo development. When the Chargers approached the council, however, they did not come with a development partner for the estimated $450 million stadium and likely $1 billion development. The city, who owned Qualcomm Stadium and the land it sat on, and Mayor Jerry Sanders were skeptical of the viability and success of such a project and quickly dismissed it. For the city, this proved to be smart as the Great Recession of 2008 crashed the real estate market and hit areas like San Diego especially hard. The next several years brought no other proposals to replace the now 40-year-old complex, and Mayor Sanders showed no optimism towards the Chargers getting a new stadium. His unwillingness to negotiate led him to say when asked about the situation, "I don't know how many cities are going to be willing to put up 400 or 500 million, but I'd take every city as a credible threat." Coupled with the NFL's desire to bring football back to Los Angeles, fears continued to grow that the Chargers would no longer be San Diego's team. Talks on the matter remained dormant until the Chargers organization released a statement at the end of the 2014 season stating that they would not be applying to relocate for the 2015 season. The statement was still not a good sign for lifelong fans of the San Diego Chargers and Qualcomm Stadium, as momentum was not on their side. Tension all around reached a new height when in January 2015, Stan Kroenke, owner of the St. Louis Rams, announced that he would be moving the team back to their former home of Los Angeles and build a brand new state-of-the-art stadium. The Chargers organization felt very intimidated as they thought a significant portion of their fan base were teamless football fans of Los Angeles. Chargers spokesperson and lead attorney Mark Fabiani showed little effort and willingness to negotiate with the city of San Diego on building a new stadium for the team. 1 month after Kroenke's announcement, the Chargers and Raiders, whom were in a similar situation, teamed up to provide their own bid to the NFL for relocation to Los Angeles. The two teams would share a $1.7 billion stadium in Carson, a suburb of Los Angeles. The plan was unsavory to Chargers fans and awaited the NFL's final approval in addition to negotiating finances for the project. 6 months later, the city of San Diego announced their final proposal to keep their team, a $1.1 billion development that demolished Qualcomm and built a brand new stadium, with $350 million coming from the city with no increase in taxes. Fabiani and the Chargers, however, were not going to negotiate, let alone approve, any proposal that wasn't in the downtown portion of San Diego, which is also where the Padres' Petco Park was built. The day following the conclusion of the 2015 NFL season, the Chargers, Rams, and Raiders all filed for relocation to Los Angeles. The NFL considered both the Rams proposal and the Chargers-Raiders proposal, and on January 16, 2016, the NFL announced that they had approved Stan Kroenke Stadium development plans and Rams' move to Los Angeles. And the Carson Stadium plan had failed. This should have been great news to Chargers fans, but it wasn't. As a part of the NFL's decision, they gave permission for the Chargers to relocate with the Rams to Los Angeles. This wasn't the end, however, as the decision simply gave Chargers owner Dan Spanos the option to move his ball club to the City of Angels. Meanwhile, in San Diego, the drama continued for the rest of 2016 as the Chargers continued to dismiss negotiations with the city, and the team put forth their own referendum that would allow the organization to build a stadium in downtown San Diego with public funds from hotel tax dollars. On November 8, 2016, the plan was overwhelmingly defeated as the proposal required 2/3 of voters to approve and only 43% did. The following month, desperation ensued as the city offered the team free rent on the 166-acre Qualcomm property for 99 years. In the background, however, the Chargers had been negotiating the final terms of their lease agreement with the Rams at the new SoFi Stadium. And on January 12, 2017, Chargers owner Dan Spanos officially announced that his team would now be known as the Los Angeles Chargers. This would become effective for the 2017 NFL season, and while the new SoFi Stadium was constructed, the team would play at the StubHub Center, the home of the LA Galaxy, Los Angeles' soccer team. The Chargers would have to pay a $645 million relocation fee to the NFL, and in the deal with the Rams, each of the two teams would use a $200 million loan and personal seat license fees to construct the new stadium. Each team would pay $1 annually to the new corporation established to manage the venue, Stadco LA LLC. It was now apparent that the football status quo of the second largest city in the U.S. would return to where it once was, nearly 50 years prior. With the same said for the city of San Diego. After playing almost 90% of their home games at Qualcomm Stadium over the course of their franchise history, the Chargers would play their final game at the 50-year-old complex on January 1, 2017, defeating the Kansas City Chiefs 37-27. Reaction to the move was negative on all sides. San Diego fans disapproved, Los Angeles fans disapproved, and NFL owners also disapproved of the move. Frustration met reality when the Chargers couldn't fill the StubHub Center in their first game in Los Angeles, despite the stadium only having 30,000 seats, which was already well under the NFL's minimum of 50,000 seats, even for temporary venues. Rumors surfaced that the NFL wanted to return the team to San Diego, but nothing happened. Meanwhile, in Mission Valley, after the Chargers' departure, Qualcomm dropped their naming rights deal with the city, and San Diego County Credit Union announced they had purchased naming rights for a measly $500,000 in a one-year deal, to which the complex would now be known as SDCCU Stadium. The newly named venue was now down to one tenant, the San Diego State University Aztecs, who had been with it since the very beginning, and the team would continue playing there for the next 2 seasons. Redevelopment plans were now focused on the Aztecs and San Diego State University as a whole, and it was clear that the stadium had reached the end of its life. The university's proposal to the city suggested demolition of SDCCU Stadium and construction of SDSU West, a mixed development that included a new smaller stadium for the Aztecs, office and retail space, hotels, and over 80 acres of parks and open space, which included a 34-acre park along the San Diego River. The proposed stadium would seat 35,000 spectators, but was designed to be expandable to 55,000 should an NFL team ever return to the city, and had an intended opening date of September 3, 2022. A competing proposal, known as Soccer City, wanted to redevelop the SDCCU Stadium site into a smaller soccer stadium to attract an MLS soccer team. But when both proposals were placed on the ballot, the SDSU proposal won out. On December 27, 2019, SDCCU Stadium would host the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl between the Iowa Hawkeyes and USC Trojans, with Iowa defeating USC 49-24. With the 2020 bowl game canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this would prove to be the stadium's final event, without anyone in attendance knowing they would never be able to return to the stadium again. The final sale of the 53-year-old stadium and the entire 166-acre property to San Diego State University was finalized on June 30, 2020, with the university paying $88 million to the city. Ground was broken for Aztec Stadium and SDSU West on August 27, 2020, with demolition of SDCCU Stadium beginning in December and would last 4 months. The site couldn't be imploded, as doing so would violate California's clean air laws, and so the stadium had to slowly be chiseled to oblivion, as lifelong San Diego sports fans and fans of the stadium held back tears watching their beloved venue die a slow, painful death. Regardless of what you call the stadium, it is undisputed the significance it contributed to sports culture in the U.S. Having hosted 3 Super Bowls, the stadium still ranks 4th for most Super Bowls hosted, and given the lifespan of most football stadiums, it will be a long time before the queue falls down that list, if it ever does at all. The venue entertained multiple generations of San Diego sports fans across football and baseball, and brought countless other events to the area. With most having grown up and lived with the stadium, it had become somewhat a symbol of San Diego, and letting it go seemed almost like letting a part of the city's identity go as well, which left a hole in the city's heart I'm not sure it will ever fill. It's disappointing to have the drama with the Chargers' departure lead to the stadium's demise, but even if the team had stayed, it would have had the same fate. San Diego, you still have the Padres, so you're not entirely teamless, and in the future, who knows? You never know what NFL team will become unsatisfied with their current stadium and be unable to negotiate building a new one with its current city. It could happen, right? And on that note, thank you for watching. Subscribe to LaBrise TV for more Modern Ruins content. And be sure to comment what modern ruin you'd like us to cover next.